Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Hello again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for this Saturday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Dave Percy. Up on the watch, warning, and advisory map, we've got a flood watch out for southeast Prince William Sound. That kicks in starts Monday afternoon and continues through late Tuesday night, and eventually rain going to shift over there, and expecting 2 to 4 inches for a 2-day total once it starts tomorrow afternoon and tomorrow evening. And for satellite imagery, not too bad over there today. A little bit of light rain, some scattered showers in the Sound there. More clouds back to the west here, streaming north due to a big upper level low here out over the eastern northeast Bering Sea. There actually looks like it's centered just south of St. Lawrence Island, the circulation of the clouds. Band of cloudiness up there across the Brooks Range to the north slope, and then some breaks here. Areas of sunshine through the eastern interior, just east of Fairbanks and up there to the northeast, and to a lesser extent down across the Copper River Basin, but high pressure developing over the northeast Pacific and eastern Gulf of Alaska today, keeping this band of moisture down to the south, and sunshine breaking out across the southeast coast during the afternoon hours. Another area of high pressure out there to the west brought some clearing out to Adak and Atska with light wind conditions. Big storm down here to the south, pushing eastward and starting to come north a little bit. Good south to north flow here with a higher pressure over to the east, and then that low center that is driving moisture northward this afternoon. You can see this big cloud shield coming right up toward Kodiak Island, and rain today along the Alaska Peninsula. Winds on the increase, coming up to just about minimum gales here late this afternoon. Those will become storm warnings later tonight, with the rain definitely increasing in that area. Otherwise, showers scattered around the western interior here. Rainfall amounts not all that great over the last 24 hours or during the day today. Kind of a trough right through here, signifying the upper level feature, and a lot of cloud showers, cool conditions out here to the west, with Nome picking up about a little over 0.4 of an inch, 0.44 inches since midnight. Actually about half an inch of rain since midnight last night, with a 12-hour amount of about 44 hundredths, but that's really tapered off this afternoon. And also over at Ambler picked up about 1/3 of an inch of rain up there in the Kobuk Valley. Otherwise, rainfall amounts not too heavy out here, just anywhere from maybe 1/10 of an inch to just a few hundredths. Showers also along the Alaska Range, a little more concentrated, and of course with the southeast flow, just some showers there on Kodiak Island. They picked up 1/15 hundredths of an inch today, and a little bit of moisture getting into Seldovia, but mostly back across into Kachemak Bay, down along the Alaska Peninsula, where both Dutch Harbor and Chignik had 0.4 of an inch falling today. That's going to increase, especially here to the east and over Kodiak Island tonight, as that front lifts northward. The low center hanging back to the south there at 968 millibars, but storm warnings coming into the picture tonight for Kodiak Island, Shelikof Strait, actually from the Barren Islands. They'll be building from south to north here. So from the Barren Islands into Shelikof Strait, eventually into Kachemak Bay, and then down along the Alaska Peninsula. The gale warnings out to the west there for the eastern Aleutian. Stays gusty on those north winds tonight for the central Aleutians, up to about 35 miles an hour. Start to pick up the wind a little bit there for the Pribilofs, with maybe some isolated showers, mostly cloudy skies, less wind, pretty light up here over Norton Sound. And rain along this trough here, again with that leftover moisture, areas of rain and showers over the southwest interior, really narrowing out and tapering off as you go up to the north there. Look for clearing to actually start to increase here over the eastern interior. A little bit more clearing tonight than what you saw today, especially over the eastern Copper River Basin areas. Looks really good here across the southeast coast. That high center now inland, so that'll kick into something of an offshore flow. Back to the west, high pressure out there over the western Aleutians, centered over the western Aleutians, ridging northeastward into the northern Bering Sea and the Bering Strait there. And that's kind of putting the brakes on that next system, trying to push out of the Russian Far East. We'll see it edges eastward a little bit tomorrow with this high center holding just south of St. Lawrence Island. So that's going to keep that back. So look for some clearing there over St. Lawrence Island with light winds. Could be some patchy fog around anywhere in the eastern Bering Sea. It also could be some pretty good clearing as well. Breezy conditions, northerly winds picking up, central Aleutians. Definitely rain here, heavy rain moving into Kodiak again tonight and through the day tomorrow, with storm warnings here now from the western North Gulf Coast areas across the Barren Islands into Kachemak Bay and down along the Alaska Peninsula there, with good gales here from Bristol Bay wrapping back around out of the north there across eastern Aleutians with rain. So a lot of wind and rain pushing into as far west as Nikolsky. And that'll be spreading northward. Actually, the shower conditions look like tomorrow afternoon, as this front approaches slowly, it tends to shut off here. Look to see some pretty good conditions. Northern Cook Inlet, it could be a mostly sunny afternoon for the Susitna Valley and Madanuska Valley. Looks like some pretty good sunshine here for Copper River Basin, all the way down to the North Gulf Coast, at least to start with. May get some high stuff moving in tomorrow afternoon. Sunshine along the southeast coast as well. Look for general increase in the mid and high level clouds here right along the coast late in the day. Otherwise looking really good with light winds, high pressure, and dry conditions all the way up to the North Slope, Arctic coast. Still some lingering showers out here in the west. Again, that leftover moisture, maybe the Yukon Delta on up into Selawik Valley area, possibly Kotzebue. But this frontal system tomorrow night will definitely make a jog to the north. Rain will be spreading into the eastern North Gulf Coast, definitely by late tomorrow night and in throughout the day on Monday. But eventually the whole pattern will shift eastward. So by Monday afternoon, the heaviest rainfall will be probably from Cape Yakataga over toward Yakutat, and that whole band kind of diminishing, the winds coming down as well as the whole frontal system begins to weaken. Should hold together enough to shove some rain into the northern panhandle here, with maybe some showers as far south as Port Alexander. Southern areas staying pretty good, mild 60s and partly to mostly sunny. Variable amounts of clouds though rolling through, and southeast flow keeps it kind of breezy, but you lose the storm warnings. Definitely lighter winds, probably most of the gales gone as well here for the North Gulf Coast down across Kodiak Island. Stays wet though, but not as heavy on the rainfall. Wet conditions all the way back to False Pass. Chance of showers there in Alaska, especially early in the day, but high pressure edging eastward, starting to clear it out a little bit there, especially for the Perbeloffs down to the central Aleutians. West Coast looking really good. And that front really weakens as it drives northward on that southerly flow. It does push northward, and it really doesn't get much moisture past the Alaska range, but could kick off a few showers from Eagle right along the frontal boundary, but nothing too terribly heavy at all. And on the light side, most of the moisture will get wrung out south side of the Alaska range or along the North Gulf Coast, the bulk of the moisture shifting off to the east. And then out to the west, another big storm coming in, just getting on the picture there, 966 millibar low, centered south of the Komodorskis. That'll push a pretty good front into the western Aleutians with possible gale force winds on Monday afternoon. Otherwise, that system up over the Russian Far East continues to fall to pieces. And for temperatures this afternoon, into the lower 60s here over the southeast coast, although Shelter Cove did push up to 70. Otherwise, mid to upper 50s for the remainder of the area, with 59 up there at Skagway, 57 Yakutat, Portage just 49 degrees, 54, or that's Whittier with 49 degrees, 54 Cordova, same temperature there at Homer, 56 Kenai, 53 down at Kodiak. Susitna Valley, 56 degrees at Talkeetna, but Palmer up to 60. 57 over Gulkana, and also there at Fairbanks and Delta, as well as Eagle and Fort Yukon, cooling back to the west with that cool upper level system. Mid to upper 40s there from actually McGrath back to the northwest, 46 degrees over at Nome, up along the north sloping Arctic coast, right around or just under 40 this afternoon, central and east side, lower 40s to the west. Kivalina 43 degrees, Kotzebue 46, same temperature there at Nome, with 53 at Bettles, 45 Savunga, and 49 degrees at Macoriac with 53 at Bethel. And for the Bering Sea, right around 50, but with some sunshine, Adak up to 55, 54 Shimia, lower 50s here from Unalaska right up the peninsula, and a little bit warmer there up toward King Sam with 59 degrees. Lows tonight, upper 40s, lower 50s out here through Bristol Bay, otherwise 30s. Copper River Basin northward to the north slope and Arctic coast, 40s back to the southwest, and 40s to near 50 for the Panhandle. Highs tomorrow near 60 here over the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, lower 60s, maybe mid 60s northeastward there. Also for this Susitna Valley, could rise into the lower 60s tomorrow afternoon, as well as better chance for the Panhandle low, well into the 60s with some sunshine. Flying weather to start with, maybe a little bit of IFR along the Alaska Range, western Prince William Sound. This will all tend to diminish as we move into the afternoon hours with that moisture shoving northward here. Just some spotty IFR in the forecast for late tonight, early tomorrow morning, Kodiak Island, Alaska Peninsula, marginal to the eastern Aleutians. IFR farther out to the west. And then for tomorrow afternoon, you'll see IFR increases here, southern coast of the Kenai Peninsula, but this area here will probably hold off until tomorrow night. Looks like this will actually improve tomorrow afternoon as conditions deteriorate farther to the south with more easterly flow, cutting off the moisture initially here to the south, but it'll eventually find its way northward. Areas IFR over the Alaska Peninsula, good VFR here over the interior, all the way down the southeast coast. Big area IFR out here west of Adak to probably the Komodorskis. Passes Anatuvik, marginal VFR becoming VFR. Adigano, VFR the entire day. Lake Clark and Merrill starting out marginal and then becoming VFR late morning through the afternoon. Rainy, same forecast, marginal VFR becoming VFR. Windy, same trend, starting out marginal, becoming VFR. Isabel, VFR. And Intesta, VFR as well. Tanita, same forecast. Portage, marginal VFR off and on throughout the day. Chilkoot and White, good VFR. Freezing levels 4,000 feet here out over the Bering Sea. Not much of a gradient through the interior. 8,000 feet northern Panhandle, much warmer there. Down toward Queen Charlotte's at about 12,000. Icing with that front moisture coming northward slowly, mostly affecting Kodiak Island with occasional widespread moderate rime icing above about 8,000 feet. Aleutian Range, eastern Alaska Peninsula, light isolated moderate spreading out to the eastern Aleutians, staying east of the Pribilofs, and maybe some areas here in the west. Upper level wind flow chart, big upper low here south of the Alaska Peninsula, northerly jet here over the western Bering up to 140 knots, wrapping around southeast right into Kodiak tomorrow, and then ridging here right into the southeast interior. Will make for a very nice day over much of the, especially the eastern interior, all the way down across the southeast coast. And for 9,000 feet, big winds, 50 to 70 knots here, southeast turning east across Bristol Bay, 45 to 50 back down across the eastern Aleutians. And at 3,000 feet, 40 to 50 knot winds here, eastern Aleutians turn easterly, 50 to 55 right into Kodiak Island. Big winds coming up into the North Gulf Coast area, lighter up over the interior and to the north. Turbulence, possible severe, Barren Islands, Kachemak Bay, Aleutian Range into northeast or eastern Bristol Bay and Kodiak Island, all below about 5,000 feet, especially for small aircraft. And after the break, I'll be back with the Ice Edge and marine forecasts.
Hello everyone and welcome to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm Jim Peranto. In Alaska, terrain can vary greatly depending on where you're at. From mountainous terrain to low-lying valleys and channeled waterways, Alaska has some of the most extreme terrain features in the world. this has a direct influence on the wind patterns. Today in studio, I have Eric Stevens, who is the Science and Operations Officer at the Fairbanks Forecast Office, and he's going to explain to us the detail of terrain-influenced winds. Welcome back, Eric.
Glad to be here, Jim.
What is meant by terrain-influenced winds?
Well, wind blows because of pressure patterns, and you have broad-scale pressure patterns like high pressure, which should make winds blow in a clockwise direction, low pressure, which makes winds blow in a counterclockwise pressure. You have a couple of H's and L's on a map, so you ought to know what the winds are. But it turns out that that broad-scale pattern will be modified by local terrain. Mountains get in the way. They interrupt this idealized flow around high and low pressure. And the result is that you can have very different winds at specific locations, even though those locations might not be that far apart.
Well, we have a lot of mountains up here in Alaska, more than you can even count, I think. And with that, you must have a lot of terrain-influenced winds in these mountainous regions.
Right. I think there's more terrain-influenced wind in Alaska than not terrain-influenced wind. And this has all kinds of implications in Alaska. Mariners know this. In southeast Alaska, wind tends to blow up and down the channels, not necessarily according to high and low pressure systems in that idealized sense. Alaska Fire Service knows how during the day, even though the pressure pattern on a broad scale is kind of quiet, that winds will tend to blow up valley, up hillside during the afternoon, and then gently come down valley, down hillside in the evenings and overnight. And that's important for them to fight fires. They need to account for that. And people who live in Delta Junction and the Fort Greely area know all about terrain-influenced winds. That's some of the most prominent terrain-influenced winds in the interior.
And they have a jet called?
The Tanana Valley Jet.
All right.
That's a homemade name that we came up with at the Weather Service because we had to deal with this phenomenon so often that it just got a name so we could know what we're talking about more quickly.
So what is the Tanana Valley Jet?
Tanana Valley Jet comes up many times in winter, sometimes in the summertime. It's more common in the winter when there's high pressure in northwestern Canada, say centered over the Yukon Territory, and a low pressure system churning away out there in the Bering Sea. So that's your broad scale weather pattern. But because of the Alaska Range and because of the Yukon-Tanana uplands there and the Tanana River cutting right between those two, when you have high pressure in Canada like that, especially in the winter, if it's Arctic air, cold high pressure, instead of having the wind flow, we should think, from south to north because you have high pressure there and low pressure out west, you should have a south wind. Well, instead, the mountains interfere with that broad idealized flow, with the result being that the air pretty much blows straight from high pressure to low pressure, straight down that Tanana Valley along the river.
So Delta Junction, I mean, they're pretty windy all the time. It seems like it, for me. I mean, when I'm looking at Delta Junction, I mean, it seems like they've always got some sort of wind there, and they get this Tanana Valley Jet. Mm-hmm. Do they also get a Chinook wind? Because that's another wind that we get up here in Alaska. Very familiar with that here in Anchorage. Do they get a Chinook wind as well in Delta Junction?
In Delta, sometimes it can seem like if it's not windy out of one direction, it's windy out of the other one. Tanana Valley Jet is an east-southeast wind going down the river valley. Tends to be a colder wind. But another prominent wind there is that Chinook wind, which instead of going down the Tanana River, comes from the south, out of Isabel Pass in the Alaska Range. A totally different kind of mechanism. To get that Isabel Pass Chinook wind going, the ingredients you need there is a strong jet stream flow. The jet stream, that high altitude river of speedy air coming up from the south, maybe call it the Pineapple Express if it's coming all the way from those lower latitudes around Hawaii, shooting milder air straight north into the Alaska Range. Well, when that air hits the Alaska Range, the jet stream spraying in there, it's like a wall of terrain, the Alaska Range, but there's a couple of notches in the wall, including Isabel Pass. And the DOT put the highway through there because it was a nice convenient low spot. Well, Mother Nature can see that gap too, and so the wind gets concentrated through Isabel Pass, sprays through there, goes by Donnelly Dome, through Fort Greely and into Delta Junction there. That's the Chinook.
And that's Chinook is a warm wind. Mm-hmm. So it warms temperatures up too as well in Delta Junction, right?
That's an important difference between the Chinook wind and that Tanana Valley Jet. The Tanana Valley Jet tends to be a colder wind. In the wintertime, the Chinook can bring temperatures even above freezing up here in interior Alaska, which can be shocking. Even in January, if a good Chinook turns on, it can be above freezing. What's really interesting is when those two wind regimes are almost of equal prominence and they can kind of fight. And in Delta Junction, you can have the Tanana Valley jet being prominent with that east-southeast wind down the river valley, colder wind. Temperatures might be 0 and windy or 10 above, kind of on the cold side. And then the wind can snap around to be out of the south, and the Chinook turns on, and temperatures get up to freezing or even above freezing. But then a couple of hours later, maybe the Tanana Valley jet turns on again. There are very subtle differences in which of those wind patterns will be active, and that's a real forecast issue.
Yeah, that must be hard to forecast for that. How do you write a forecast to sort of, follow those sort of wind patterns and temperature differences throughout the day? That's a tough deal for
a
forecasters.
meteorologist hopes to find one of the patterns being the predominant one, and you think, well, that one should win out. But it's those cases where each one is equally strong, like having two equally matched prize fighters in the ring, and you can't really tell which one's going to come up with. It's such a close fight. That is a tough one. It's safe to say it'll be windy.
Yes, very windy. You're in Fairbanks. That's where the forecast office is. Delta Junction, to the east. Is there differences there when these kind of wind patterns are going on, or is Fairbanks experiencing that Tanana Valley jet or the Chinook wind? What's going on with the two cities?
That's a very reasonable question, because Tanana Valley jet, well, Fairbanks is near the Tanana River. Fairbanks is north of the Alaska Range. Chinooks, Tanana Valley jets should affect Fairbanks as well. And Fairbanks can get windy, but it's not like Delta. We find that even though they are on the broad scale at first glance similar, that Delta is closer to the Alaska Range, it's closer to the opening of the mouth of the Tanana River there, and they're more exposed to those winds. You learn this the hard way by having to forecast it and see what happens. And the fact is that even though by Alaska standards, Fairbanks and Delta are pretty close to each other, about 100 miles apart. In Alaska, that's not much. Both interior, got some mountains around there. You'd think they'd be similar. But Fairbanks in the wintertime especially, turns out hardly ever very windy. Fairbanks is trapped under that temperature inversion, very quiet air, where Delta, it's not windy every day in Delta, but they're windy many days in the wintertime. The overall lesson here is, even though we have broad weather systems that affect entire parts of the state, because of the terrain modifying that broad circulation, you get very particular results at just one location as opposed to another one. Even though they're pretty close to each other, that's terrain-influenced winds. And that's what we call a microclimate too. A microclimate is the result of local terrain modifying the impact of broad-scale weather systems. Alaska has a lot of terrain, and Alaska has a lot of microclimates.
Well, thank you for coming in today and talking to us about terrain-influenced winds. It's been a great experience, Eric.
Hey, it's been my pleasure, and thank you for the time.
You're welcome. And thank you for joining us here on Alaska Weather Facts. Until next time.
Welcome back. Sea ice analysis today. Ice about 250 nautical miles north of Point Barrow, while this area is about 100 nautical miles north of Mackenzie Bay, and still expected to melt slowly for the next couple of weeks without any really big changes in position. And for the southeast coast marine forecast, small craft advisories coming in, 25 knots south coast, 30 knots on the north coast, extreme coast, looking at gale force gust of 45 out of the east, 15 knot winds over the inside waters. And then for Monday, still with the small craft advisory, southeast, 25 south, 30 knots north, 45 knot gusts continuing there for the extreme north coast. Southeasterly is picking up a little bit over the inside waters. Stevens Passage, Clarence Strait at 20 knots. And tomorrow, full gales here, starting out 55 knots for the eastern North Gulf Coast, 55 knot winds, west side right across the Barren Islands into Kamishak Bay. Northeast 40 for southern Cook Inlet, northeast 30 northern Cook Inlet, and small craft advisories for Prince William Sound. Then for Monday, northerlies 20 northern Cook Inlet, staying 30 knots to the south, lose the gales and storms, and except over here, holding on to that easterly at 35 knots, east southeast, east 30 for Prince William Sound, so picking up there. Otherwise, small craft advisories everywhere else south of the Forelands. And for the Shelikof Strait zone tomorrow, northeast 55 knots, east 50 knots, east side of Kodiak, and from Sitkinak to Castle Cape, gales south of there to Cape Sarachev, northeast 40 from Bristol Bay, right on down the coastline there to Cape Saratchev on the Bering Sea side of the peninsula. Those fall back to about 30 knots here, northeast 30 for the peninsula on Monday, 11 to 13 foot seas, and 25 to 30 knot winds now east-southeast for Kodiak Island, east 30 for Bristol Bay. Aleutians, strongest winds will be over the Fox Islands there, more in that gradient. So northerlies, good northerlies, 40 knots, higher gusts, and seas 14 to 16 feet. Gales all the way back to Nikolsky. Small craft advisories here for Adak and Atka, northwest 30, northwest 20, falling back to 15 in the western zone. And then with that next front pushing in, southerlies increased to 35 knots out there on Monday, and kind of a variable wind direction, but 25 knot winds here for the central Aleutians, and northerlies coming down a little bit, 30 to 35 knots for the Fox Islands with 12 to 14 foot seas. Southwest coast, northeast, 35 knots there south of Nunivak Island, turned northerly at 30 for the Pribilofs, falling back to 20. Pretty light winds for St. Lawrence Island. And then for Monday, pick it up to 15 knots there, northeast 20 north of Nunivak Island. Small craft advisories, pretty stiff breeze at 30 knots there coming out of Kuskokwim Bay, turning north 25 across the Pribilofs. Up along the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, pretty light winds, just a southerly drift, 5 to 10 knots, seas maybe 3 feet, up to 15, central west side, and 20 knots there from Cape Beaufort to Cape Thompson, then back down to 15. And for Monday, lighter winds, kind of an easterly breeze there, barely a breeze to south 15, southeast 10 on the west side. Easterlies, though, picking up here. Small craft advisories on the eastern Beaufort Sea coast there to 25 knots. And for tonight, again, watching this strong front, you can see the tight gradient, storm warnings coming in, as I just mentioned, here to these areas, into Kodiak, rain heavy at times, gradually pushing northward. A little bit of moisture up over southern Alaska, a little more extensive here to the west. But then tomorrow, that tends to lift northward, taking its time due to the easterly flow up here along the coast, but definitely rain heavy at times, Kodiak, Alaska Peninsula, and this thing lifting northward tomorrow night will push actually into the interior and weaken on Monday, something like this, with the heaviest rain gradually shifting east.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.